Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Funeral, Praesentialis in Aeternum, out December 10th on Season of Mist. This album has 6 tracks, 56 minutes in length, and this is the band's 6th full-length studio album. They are a Norwegian funeral doom metal band. Now this album is super tight, very cohesive, very compact, zero room to breathe from start to finish. And normally when you have a record like this, the songs start to kind of blend one with the other and it becomes really hard to tell the forest from the trees. It's not the case with this album. It obviously has a lot of the same common denominators, song in and song out, but they sprinkle a few different nuances here and there in order for each track to have its own fingerprint, but all of them staying very close to its origins. So it's an album that feels dynamic at times, that has that great sense of mobility from beginning to end, but the most important aspect of how they built this record is it's an album that it's easy to digest and it doesn't become cumbersome for the listener. So when you get to the end of the record, even though you've been listening to it for 56 minutes, you're ready to go back again to the beginning and start the journey once again. That shows you that the album is really well designed, that it has a very interesting approach as far as the structure, but also as far as the soundscape is concerned. Now, once you get into the soundscape, this record really surprised me on a positive side. I was expecting it to be perhaps a little bit more one-dimensional, to be doomy, to drag you down, to feel like you're just barely moving or not even moving at all, and then obviously create a little bit of a sense of uniformity across every single track. Now, while some of these elements are true to how this album comes across sound-wise, this album has a lot more depth, is a lot richer than I was expecting it. And I felt like there was 2 elements that really define this richness of sound and this depth of experience, and that is the orchestrations that the album has and definitely the vocal approach. Now in between you have the guitars playing a very important role nevertheless, driving a little bit of the experience, creating some heaviness, allowing this album to have 2 layers or 2 sides of the same coin as far as the guitars are concerned. They're bringing you down with heaviness, and at the same time they're lifting you up with melody. So they have a very important role, but it's a role that gets really squeezed in between those orchestrations and the vocals. Let's tackle the orchestrations first. I thought they were phenomenal. Now some may say that this allows the record to deviate a little bit from that traditional funeral doom sound. I really like what it adds. It adds depth, it adds quality of sound, it adds quality of atmosphere. It makes the record feel bigger without necessarily having to add volume or heaviness in order to drive that experience. The orchestrations on this album are phenomenal. Song in and song out, some songs with a little bit more of a predominant role, some songs with less, but never really walking away from any single track without leaving its fingerprint, without leaving its DNA, and leaving a very strong scar in terms of what this record puts forward. The emotion that gets transported throughout the experience of listening to this album, a lot of it comes from that orchestrations and how those orchestrations impact the overall atmosphere of the sound. Then on the other hand, you have the vocals. The vocals were phenomenal. The clean vocals really balance this record out, really allows you to go deep or sink deeper with every passing minute. Also adding layers to those vocals was a very important element, because once again, it creates depth, it creates volume without having to resort to something heavier, without having to change the DNA of the tracks or have to change the DNA of the atmosphere and the emotion that's held within the songs themselves. So I really enjoy the clean vocals, how it helps you navigate these tracks, how it guides you, almost holding your hand and helping you cross this desert of sound and experience while you're sinking into those quicksands of sound. Really incredible. And then you have the layers behind them in order to create a little bit more presence, like I said, a little bit more depth, a little bit more volume. Really important as well, because it creates some ebbs and flows vocally that makes the record feel a lot more dynamic. Now the harsh vocals come in, and they normally come in balancing out the sound that's starting to become slightly heavier as well. The 2 almost go hand in hand throughout the entire album. I like the fact that they were sprinkled in throughout the entire record. It's not like there's a song where they dominate or there's a song that you feel like they were taking overall control of the track. They almost feel like just a spice being added to a very well cooked meal. They bring in a different kind of flavor, they change the eyesight of the listener, they allow you to reset or feel differently towards the track towards the emotional content of the song. And all of these things are really important in order for the overall soundscape to be as rich as possible, in order for this album to be more than just a one-dimensional record and have a lot more layers and still allow itself to be really easy to digest, really easy to understand. This is not a record that becomes cumbersome from that perspective. You don't have to dive really deep. You can, but you don't have to. You can just swim across the surface and understand exactly what this record is all about. So that's the beauty of the album. It gives you the chance of doing both things. Go deep into it or just go across the surface. Either way, you're going to get something interesting out of it. And overall, I really feel like this is the best Funeral Doom album of 2021. Now, you can argue that this is not traditional Funeral Doom, that there's some goth elements into the sound, into the atmosphere, the way the orchestrations play such a crucial role, such a pivotal role, and a very important one in terms of how the sound comes across. All of these things you can argue in terms of where this album is going, what sound does it have, is it truly a Funeral Doom metal record? In my opinion, there is enough of it there for it to be that, and there's nothing else to be said about it. And from that perspective, it has to be the more complete, the more robust, the more interlaced Funeral Doom album that I've heard this year, allowing me to digest it really well, understand exactly what is happening, and not feel overburdened by the experience of having to navigate through the entirety of the album in one sitting. All important elements for this specific genre. Now, as far as songs are concerned, I picked my favorite 3 tracks and are the last 3 tracks on the album. Erindring II. This song is beautiful. It's beautiful because it has this somber quality that it's mingled in between the way the riff comes across and the way the orchestrations tie in with that guitar riff. The two almost becoming one. And then the track has these incredible dips that you feel like you're navigating here, and suddenly there's nowhere for you to walk, and you just fall into these deep ravines of sound and experience that become super atmospheric, driven by orchestrations, they're driven by pianos, really feeling stretched out and at the same time stripped out in order for you to have this sense of movement from up and down, and then bringing you back up again with the heavier portions of the track, really igniting the song, using the clean vocals to enhance the overall experience, to enhance the overall track with layers, to give it depth, to make it more rich, and then bringing in the heavier vocals, the harsh vocals, in order for you to feel like not just musically, this song has ebbs and flows, this song is dynamic, but vocally the same thing. And then as the track progresses, you start to see a merger of everything that you heard from beginning all the way to the end. When you get to the end of the track, the song is really blended. It's no longer how it was at the beginning, it's no longer how it was in the middle, it's a mixture of both. Really interesting way of thought process behind creating a song like this. Next you have Oppvåkning, a slow moving track, a track that has vocal layers in order to create depth and atmosphere, something that you're going to see consistently throughout the entire record. It all comes down to what is the emotional approach behind it, and that's where the change is happening from song to song. The sound behind this track helps set the mood. I really felt like this was a vocally driven track, and the sound was just there to kind of complement the background, almost creating background noise to what was happening vocally. But it doesn't define the song. The vocals really define the experience of where you're going with this track, how you feel towards it. And there's almost a little bit of a sense of birth or rebirth, emerging from a cocoon. The way you start to process the song from beginning to end, you start to feel like you're coming back to life. And there's a little bit more for you, more air for you to breathe with every single minute that passes as you move along from beginning to end of the song. Last but not least, Devlin, a merger between sound and vocals that becomes almost seamless. This track has that incredible ability of blending these two things, and they all just feel like one. One feels like the continuation of the other, and vice versa. This allows a bass line that exists within this track to really pop, and you really feel it, and it's grounding the experience of the song, it's grounding the sound itself, helping the drums to give this incredible foundation that just feels so heavy, not necessarily musically heavy, but emotionally heavy, that is dragging you down, that's bringing you down. And it's a really important aspect, because then the guitars come on top of it and they feel like they're mushing along. They're having a hard time moving, so they're moving very slowly. They're dragging you with it. That's the kind of experience that you have. but the vocals come on top of those guitars. This is really a lot of layers. The vocals come on top of those guitars, and they feel like they're just swimming above it. Everything else is beneath it in order to allow the vocals to move a lot more freely from beginning all the way to the end, switching between clean and harsh vocals, making the sound feel a lot more stable, a lot more compact, and the vocals being really the puppet master that changes the eyesight of the listener, that changes the dynamics of the song up and down, allowing the track to have this dreary nature, but at the same time move really well from beginning all the way to the end. Outstanding track to close off the record. This is it. This is Funeral with Praesentialis in Aeternum, out December 10th on Season of Mist. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and I'll see you guys around. Take care.